welcome back to the deep dive. If you're looking for a crash course in, well, how global commodities get regulated, and maybe how a whole lot of paperwork can actually help stop humanitarian disasters, then you're definitely in the right place today. We are plunging straight into the official rulebook, the real nitty-gritty, for one of the most critical international frameworks, really, of the last few decades. The Kimberley Process Certificate Scheme for rough diamonds. You'll hear it called the KPCS.
Yeah, and our sources today, they're the core official texts.
Yeah.
Provisions, the annexes. This isn't, opinion pieces or news reports. This is the actual structure, the legal language that countries agreed to implement globally.
Exactly. So our mission here is to give you the shortcut.
Okay.
We want to unpack the precise rules, the structure that was put in place, specifically to filter out conflict diamonds. And just as vital, how it aims to protect the legitimate diamond trade, too. But before we get into the mechanics, the how, we really need to grasp the why. What was the problem that drove this whole massive effort? Why did the world decide it needed this very technical scheme?
Well, the preamble of the KPCS itself is surprisingly direct about it. It wasn't just about money or trade rules. The core issue was that the trade in these conflict diamonds had become a matter of, and this is the official language, serious international concern.
Serious international concern, okay.
Yeah, it was directly linked to funding wars, letting rebel movements undermine legitimate governments, and really crucially, it was fueling the spread of weapons, especially small arms and light weapons, which caused so much devastation.
So it draws a straight line from this tiny, super valuable mineral, right, to global security issues.
Absolutely. The documents spell it out. This scheme was deemed necessary because of the, quote, devastating impact these conflicts had on peace, safety, security, leading to systematic and just gross human rights violations. It wasn't just a trade tweak, it was framed as a crisis response, using trade rules to back up UN Security Council and General Assembly resolutions.
And that brings up this sort of dual purpose, right?
Yeah.
Stopping the conflict funding is, the moral imperative. But the KPCS documents also explicitly say they have to act to stop conflict diamonds from damaging the legitimate diamond trade.
Yeah.
Because that legal trade is, well, a massive contributor to the economies of lots of developing countries. Can't just shut it all down.
Exact that tension. Stopping the bad stuff while protecting the good, the vital legal economies. That's why the framework had to be so intricate, so specific. It kind of forces the legitimate industry itself to become a partner in compliance, makes them police their own supply chains, essentially.
Okay, so let's lay out the basics. Define our terms. What exactly is being regulated here, and who's doing the regulating? Let's hit those key definitions first.
Sure. Section I lays it all out. First, conflict diamonds. The definition is actually quite narrow. It means rough diamonds used by rebel movements or their allies specifically to finance conflict aimed at undermining legitimate governments.
Right. It's tied directly to rebels fighting established governments. That's why that term is so specific.
Precisely. It's a political and military definition, really.
Okay, and what about the diamonds themselves? I guess it's just saying diamond isn't specific enough for, customs forms.
Oh, definitely not. Way too vague. So rough diamonds means diamonds that are unworked or only simply sawn, cleaved, or bruted. And to make this work globally, it gets super technical. It references specific harmonized commodity coding system classifications, HS codes.
The HS codes, 7102.1L, 7102.21, 7102.31. That tells you this is built for border agents, right? Deep in the weeds of customs rules.
Absolutely. It's not a guideline. It's a specific coded regulation.
And the regulators, the participants. Who gets to be in this club?
A participant is defined as a state, or sometimes a regional economic group like the EU, where the certification scheme is actually in effect. The whole thing works only because these sovereign entities agree to play by these rules based on, equality and mutual benefits. You're either in, follow the rules.
Or you're out. Cut off from the legitimate market.
Pretty much, yeah. Completely cut off.
Okay, now let's get to the heart of it. The certificate itself. If the goal is a clean paper trail, this certificate sounds like the universal passport for diamond shipments. What does it actually do?
It's the main gatekeeper. Section 2 says a Kimberley Process Certificate is a forgery-resistant document. That's key. And it has to go with every single shipment of rough diamonds being exported. Not just a batch, every shipment.
Forgery-resistant. So physically secure somehow. And what does that have to say? Is there specific language?
Yes, absolutely mandatory. It must have the exact title, Kimberley Process Certificate, and it must include this specific compliance statement, basically saying, The rough diamonds in this shipment have been handled in accordance with the provisions of the Kimberley Process Certification Scheme. It's a public stamp of approval, non-negotiable.
Okay, let's get into the details that make it work, the data. What has to be on that certificate? This must be crucial for tracking and finding fraud, right?
Totally crucial. Annex I lists the mandatory data points. It's designed for traceability, needs a unique serial number, including the country code of whoever issued it, the ISO 31661 code.
Yeah, okay.
Date it was issued, date it expires. Details on the exporter and the importer, how many parcels are in the shipment, but really key for spotting problems later. It must list the carat weight mass and the value in U.S. dollars.
Both weight and value. Why both? Why U.S. dollars specifically?
Well, the weight tells you the physical amount, right? But the U.S. dollar value gives the economic picture. When they aggregate all this data later, authorities can compare, say, the average value per carat from country A versus country B.
Looking for weird discrepancies.
Exactly. Is a shipment being way undervalued, maybe to dodge taxes? Or is it overvalued, maybe for money laundering? The dollar value provides that standard measure to spot financial tricks. It locks that info down right from the start.
So that economic data is basically the surveillance tool.
Got it.
Right.
Now, the trade rules themselves, Section 3. You said it's like a club with strict rules?
Very strict. It's binary, really.
Enough.
Participant can only import rough diamonds from another participant, and that shipment must have a valid certificate, period.
Okay.
And, flip side, they are explicitly forbidden from importing from or exporting to any state or entity that is not a participant. It creates this closed loop, starves non-compliant players of market access.
What if diamonds are just passing through a participant country, like in transit? Does that trigger the whole import-export thing? Good question. No, there's an exception for transit. As long as the authorities in that transit country make sure the shipment leaves their territory in the exact same state it arrived in.
Meaning the seals aren't breaking, the containers untouched.
Precisely. The tamper-resistant container has to be unopened. That avoids massive headaches for big shipping hubs.
Okay, so the certificate is the passport. Tamper-resistant containers help secure the goods physically. But how do they ensure what goes into the box in the first place is legit? That brings us to internal controls. The security inside each participant country. What are the minimum standards they have to meet?
Right, and this is where the KPCS really reaches into national affairs. Section 4 lays out these internal undertakings. Every participant must set up and maintain a system of internal controls. And the goal is explicit: to eliminate the presence of conflict diamonds from shipments leaving their country and from diamonds entering it, too.
Eliminate, so they have to prove a negative, basically.
Yeah.
Prove there's no illicit stuff. How do they do that physically?
Well, they have to designate specific government bodies as importing and exporting authorities. But there's also a really important physical rule. Rough diamonds have to be imported and exported in tamper-resistant containers.
The containers again?
Yeah, it might seem small, but the KPCS effectively mandated a global standard for the physical security of the shipping box itself. That was a big step in standardizing the supply chain, often overlooked, but really practical.
And legally. What kind of teeth do participants need to put behind these rules domestically?
This is critical. Participants must enact actual laws or regulations to implement and enforce the scheme. And, importantly, they have to maintain dissuasive and proportional penalties for transgressions.
Dissuasive penalties, so real consequences, fines, maybe jail time.
The scheme doesn't specify exactly, but yes, penalties strong enough to make cheating not worth the risk. This isn't just a suggestion from the KPCS. It forces sovereign states to create domestic legal power, criminal or civil, to back it up.
That feels like a pretty significant delegation of sovereignty, doesn't it? An international agreement dictating national law and enforcement.
It absolutely is. And the scheme puts a big chunk of the burden on the companies involved, too. Before an exporting authority can even validate a certificate, the exporter, the company shipping the diamonds, has to provide a formal declaration stating the diamonds are not conflict diamonds.
So layers of liability. The exporter declares it, the authority validates it.
Exactly. It pushes responsibility down the chain, requires documentation at multiple points.
And you mentioned earlier the industry itself plays a role here too, even though it's a government scheme.
Yes, the KPCS explicitly welcomes voluntary industry self-regulation. Things like companies implementing their own warranty systems that follow the diamonds down the pipeline, getting independent audits done, having internal industry penalties. This helps the government authorities trace things without having to micromanage every single business deal.
Okay, that covers the rules and controls. Now, oversight. A system like this depends on trust. but also verification. How does the club check up on its members?
Mhm.
What about cooperation and transparency?
Right, Section V. This is where all that data we talked about, carat weight, US dollar value, comes back into the picture. Participants must compile and exchange statistics following Annex 3 rules. We're talking quarterly aggregate stats on exports and imports, and semi-annual stats on production, all broken down by carat weight and value.
Quarterly and semi-annually. That sounds like a huge administrative task for every country involved. 4 times a year for trade data.
Wow. What's the point of collecting all that comparative economic data? The point is anomaly detection. The data gets compiled, sometimes published on a restricted basis, so all participants can see the global flow. They look for irregularities.
Like what?
Like, say, country X suddenly reports diamond production way, way higher than its mines could possibly produce. Or the average price per carat they're declaring on exports looks suspiciously low compared to the global average. These kinds of signals could suggest conflict diamonds are maybe leaking into their legitimate supply chain.
Okay, so the data flags potential problems. Then what? Section 6 deals with compliance, right? What happens if those anomalies appear? Or if there are other serious concerns about a participant not playing by the rules?
First off, decisions on compliance are supposed to be made by consensus among all participants, usually at their big annual plenary meetings. If there are what the text calls credible indications of significant non-compliance, then the participants, again by consensus, can decide on extra verification steps.
Extra steps. What's the biggest hammer they have in the toolbox?
The most significant measure is probably the review mission. This is where they could decide to send experts from other participant countries or designated representatives to visit the country in question.
On-site inspections.
Essentially, yes. To conduct an expert analysis of their internal controls, check their processes, look at their data.
That sounds like pretty serious international oversight.
Yeah.
But there's a catch, isn't there? Relating back to that sovereignty issue.
There's a huge catch. While these review missions have to be conducted properly, analytical, expert, impartial women, they crucially require the consent of the participant concerned. The country being investigated has to agree to let the review team in.
So you can't force an inspection.
Nope. The final report, along with any comments from the country that was reviewed, gets posted, but only on a restricted part of the KPCS website. So the whole enforcement mechanism, at its strongest point, still relies on the cooperation of the state potentially under suspicion.
That's fascinating. Okay, let's try to wrap this up with the key takeaways for you listening. The KPCS, it's all about structure. A very precise definition of conflict diamonds, these tamper-resistant certificates, needing specific economic data. Remember the US dollar value and carat mass, and forcing countries to pass actual national laws with real penalties.
Yeah, and connecting it to the bigger picture, the KPCS is really a landmark agreement. It managed to impose incredibly detailed global trade and security standards, which is remarkable, but it always has to operate within that political reality of respecting national sovereignty. It's like a very complex machine that needs consensus and cooperation to actually run effectively.
And that tension, that balance, leads us to our final thought for you to maybe mull over. The whole scheme, as we've seen, is built on this explicit respect for state sovereignty. Yet, it mandates national laws, demands sensitive economic data collection, and its ultimate accountability tool, the review mission for suspected non-compliance, hinges entirely on the consent of the country being investigated. So the question to ponder is, how truly effective can any international regulatory scheme be when its core power to police its members is ultimately conditional on their permission? Something to think about, that constant trade-off between needing global enforcement and respecting national independence.